အားလုံးမင်္ဂလာပါရှင် So today we're going to talk about IELTS speaking part 2. In this video, I will give you some tips to prepare for the IELTS speaking test, part 2 in particular, and I will give you a sample question, and you will also get to listen to a model answer by me. So let's get started. So let's start by talking about what happens in the speaking part 2. So in the exam, you will be given a piece of paper or a book, and you will read a task that the examiner gives you on this piece of paper or in a book. You will be given 60 seconds or a minute to prepare for this task. And then after the 60 minutes is up, the examiner will tell you to start speaking. And then after the 2 minutes is up, the examiner will tell you to stop. After you finish your 2-minute talk, the examiner will ask you 1 or 2 questions. So that's basically what happens in the IELTS speaking test for the part 2. So let's now move on to the tips for preparing for part 2. The first tip, it is important to choose something that will give you enough to talk about to fill for 2 minutes. So I'm going to share a personal anecdote with you all. When I took the IELTS test, maybe more than a decade ago, I was asked in part 2 of the task what my favorite movie was. And I knew at that time that I wanted to talk about Lord of the Rings because I had just finished watching Lord of the Rings a couple of days ago, I believe, with my sister, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So I was sure. So during the time that I was supposed to prepare for the talk, which was about a minute, I did not take notes. I just kind of looked around the room, looked at the examiner, and I felt overly confident. And I thought I had so many things to talk about. But when I started answering giving the 2-minute talk, I soon found out that I ran out of things to say way before the 2-minute mark. And it was very awkward. And I kept having to repeat all the things that I had said before. So needless to say, that was a very awkward test. I don't think that I got 9. I believe that I got 8 or 8.5, which was pretty good still, but I could have gotten a 9 easily if I had just prepared to talk about the things that they had asked me and continue for the whole 2 minutes. So my first tip is for you to remember to choose something that will give you enough to talk about to fill 2 minutes. Have plenty of information and backstory and example to continue talking for the full 2 minutes. Tip 2, it is best to write any notes in English rather than in your own language. I've seen this time and again. Many of my students like to take notes in their own language. You know, it's okay if you have a lot of time, but when you are running out of time and if you have only like 60 seconds to do so, do it in bullet points and do it in short phrases or just words, and also do it in English because you don't have a lot of time to, translate and things like that. So write any notes, take any notes in English. Tip 3, you should talk about all 4 points of the task, but you don't have to talk about them in the same order as the task. You may have more to say about 1 or 2 points than the other. Yes, the questions are there and they're there to guide you and help you expand your talk for 2 minutes. So if you answer all of the 4 questions, you will undoubtedly reach your talk will take longer than a minute at the very least. So make sure you answer all 4 questions. But when you're doing that, you don't have to answer them in the order that the question has listed, of course, but do so in a way that you answer all of the 4 questions. So let's continue with tip 4. Try to vary the language you use when you are giving a talk. This will help you get a higher band score, right? So the question might ask you something like, what is your favorite item of clothing? So if you continue to use the item of clothing the entire time, you're not paraphrasing, you're not using synonyms, you're not using different words to describe what you've been asked to talk about. So that will result in a lower band score. So try to learn synonyms, try to have ways to use language that will allow you to expand or paraphrase the question. Tip 5, you don't have to tell the truth in your talk. You can describe something that didn't happen if you find that easier. Just remember to talk about all the task point. So this is where you get to be creative. The IELTS exam is not testing your moral compass or your life experiences. If you need to be creative, as in lie, you can. Nobody's checking it up. As long as it gives you enough information and enough material to continue talking for 2 minutes, please do so. So let your creativity run wild for the task 2 question, and also maybe for the other other parts as well. The last tip that I want to give you is do not worry if you're still speaking when the examiner tells you to stop. It's better to speak right up to the 2-minute limit than to speak for 90 seconds, right? So it's important that you use the 2 minute very well. If the examiner asks you to stop because you don't have a stopwatch on the desk in the exam room, it's okay. Don't take it personally. Sometimes our students, in my experience, some of my students get really shocked and scared that the examiner has told them to stop talking mid-sentence, and then they get very flustered and they find it difficult to continue with part 3. Don't take it personally. It's just the examiner telling you that the time is up and they will continue to ask you questions. So those are the 6 top tips that I have for you for preparing for the IELTS speaking part 2. So now let's look at some of the useful language that you can use when you want to give a talk. So it is important to structure your talk well, and in particular, you should introduce your topic clearly. And so when you begin your talk, these are some of the phrases that you can use. I'm going to tell you about my favorite item of clothing. What I want to talk about is my favorite dress that I've been wearing very frequently in the past months. I've decided to tell you about this one item of clothing that I absolutely love in my wardrobe. Okay, so those are some of the phrases that you can use to begin your talk. So you have 4 questions, right? So if you wanted to introduce all these different questions as different points, these are some of the language that you can use. So you can say, so let me move on to, and then you tackle the next question that you want to answer. And you can also repeat the question and repeat the question, right? So just say like, and what is my favorite thing to wear? Okay, so that's you repeating the question. As I've mentioned before, is also a different way to reintroduce the same point to add some more information. And you also can say a phrase like this, now I want to describe, and then you can continue with the next question. So IELTS part 2 is a talk, and if you can, you should round up your talk. So these are some of the simple ways to end your talk. You can say, yeah, all in all. You can also say, okay, in brief. Or you can also say, well, I think I've covered all the questions. And you can also say to summarize. Notice at this point that I'm using like yeah or okay or well. So all of these shows that you are actually spontaneously talking about the topics rather than learning the phrases by heart. When you learn things by heart, the talk doesn't sound natural and it will lead to a lower band score. So it's important to continue this realistic, spontaneous form of conversation as much as you can. So these are some of the ways that you can end your talk. So next part is where we're going to practice together. So this is a sample IELTS part 2 question, and you're going to take a look at it. You can either take a picture, you can stop here for a couple of minutes, and you can prepare by giving yourself 60 seconds or a minute to talk about this topic. In the next part of the video, I will give you a sample answer by me. So this is the part of the video where I give you a sample answer. Before I begin, I will set my timer to 2 minutes. Let's see how this goes, because I haven't actually like planned it properly because I wanted to remain as honest as possible as I can possibly be to see how I would tackle this question if I were asked in the exam. So let's get started. I will talk about my linen dress. My linen dress is forest green color and it has pockets. And that is the one thing in my wardrobe right now that I absolutely love. And that's one thing that I cannot live without at the moment. So it's a linen dress and it's handmade and it's made to order basically for me. Where I got this dress from is an interesting story. When I was younger, I used to be a big supporter of fast fashion. As I became older, I realized that fast fashion actually impacts the environment very negatively, and it also uh, is like fast fashion brands like Zara or H&M support a lot of unfair labor practices for workers who are working in the factories. So I decided that I wanted to do better in terms of clothing. So I started looking for different options. And that's when I found on Etsy this brand that was started by a Lithuanian lady. And she got all of her resources, all of the linen raw materials from her local suppliers. And she makes all of the dresses and blouses and trousers and jackets and all sorts made to order. So I decided to, give it a go, even though it was a little bit pricier compared to fast fashion items. It was worth it. Linen dresses are linen materials are extremely versatile. You can wear them in the summer, they're breezy and they're cool, and you can also layer them up in the winter as well. So that's why this little forest green dress with pockets, deep pockets, have become my favorite item of clothing. All right, that was nearly 2 minutes, 1 minute and 59 seconds. So I don't know how I did, but I have a pretty good feeling about it. I think that because I've done like the IELTS test about 4 or 5 times, and I always get 9 or 8.5 or 8 when I was a lot younger. But now when I go to do the IELTS test, just to refresh myself, refresh my test taking skills, I always get a 9. So I'm pretty confident that that was a pretty good answer. When you're in the exam, you have a different mood as well. You want to be able to kind of like throw in all of the vocabulary and also show the range of grammar that you can use. So I think I did pretty well, but we'll see. Right. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the checklist that you can use after you do this practice as well. And this is a checklist that you can use for yourself for the task 2 practice as you continue independently. Okay, so this is the self checklist that you can use. The first question that you should ask yourself is, did you speak the full 2 minutes, right? You should be able to continue on for more than 1 minute at the very least. Did you answer all 4 questions? That's the question that you need to ask yourself as well. So when you're practicing by yourself, the best thing is to record yourself speaking and then listen to yourself again and answer all of these questions. Did my answer match the question? Sometimes we make a mistake and we answer wrong things because we interpret the questions wrong or we didn't read the questions correctly. So this is something that you should really be looking at to see that if you have actually achieved the task that they have given. That is one of the rubric items, the items on the rubric. The next thing is, did I use paraphrases and synonyms? So I did have this urge to use the phrase favorite item of clothing several times, but I did try to avoid it as much as I can. So in your talk as well, have you tried to vary the paraphrases and the synonyms as well as you could possibly do? Did I provide examples and reasons to support my answer? Did you do that? I think I tried to give a backstory. I tried to have a different range of vocabulary and grammar in the answers. Did I give long answers to the questions? I think I did that as well. So this one, did I use the PPF approach whenever appropriate? PPF is the past, present, and the future tenses. Are you using all of those? Are you giving yourself a chance to use all of these tenses as much as you can. When I did the answer, I tried to talk about what I used to think when I was younger with fast fashion. That was me trying to use the past tense, and I tried to use the present tense. And I think that maybe the future tense was a trickier one. I'm not sure I used it, but I think I did try to cover as much as possible. If I listen to my answer again, I'm pretty sure there are many ways to improve it, and I would try to include some aspects of future to continue or to vary up the grammatical range. Did I talk? Did my talk have a beginning and an ending, right? So when you're in the test, as I did the test realistically, sometimes it's difficult for you to have an ending or a beginning, a proper, a finished talk per se. So if you can, try to remember to end the talk if you know that the 2 minute is nearly ending. You can either do that by using like words, phrases like all in all, but you can also try to just summarize whatever that you have talked about. Did I have long, quiet pauses in my talk? So that's something to avoid. If you have long, quiet pauses, that's when there is no continuity in your speech, and that's when the pen scores are reduced. Did I use intonation to highlight key information? So intonation is very important. Pronunciation is important because it is one of the items on the rubric, but that doesn't mean that you have to sound like any native English speaker. You don't have to sound like a British person or an American or whatever, whatever people who speak mainly English sound like. But you should be able to use different intonation to highlight the key information that you are answering in your talk. Okay, so that ends the very long video of me explaining to you what you can do if you want to prepare yourself for the IELTS Task 2. And also, of course, this checklist is going to be in the description in the video description part of the video, and you can copy and paste it, and you can put it on a Word document and use it when you are practicing and when you listen back to your answers. So everybody, if you found this video useful, please subscribe, and please share this video as much as you can. I'm very grateful for that. And if you have any questions, leave the comments down below. Thank you.